right. Welcome to All That Jam, where music has no limits. We're here today with Rob Compa. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Nice. Kevin, this is, I think, a treat for us just because, Rob, we've loved what you do for so many years in all its various forms, shapes, forms, and everything. So why don't we just get started with maybe if you want to let us know kind of, you're based in Vermont, and that's where you are right now, right?
Yeah, I'm home. Yep.
Nice. Very cool. There's been a lot going on lately, of course. And so why don't we just chat a little bit about kind of what you have going on at the moment, and we'll see where that takes us.
Sure. You start. You bring it up. So, you know.
Well, let me say this. We've talked to 3/4 of your old band who just went on a hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
You will be the third out of the 4 members that we've spoken to over the past 3 years. You guys said farewell.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, I guess that was incredibly emotional over the end of the year last year, huh?
No, not really. Not for me. It was pretty great. Like the way it ended was awesome. Like, we got to the last show and I was kind of like leading up to it and everything. I was feeling okay. I was just really mostly focused on enjoying it while we still had it, you know, and I did. And then we got to the last show and I was like, well, I haven't really like felt too bummed out yet. Maybe it's all gonna like come on stage and I'm not, you know, and I'm gonna just be this blubbering pile of emotion in front of like all these people. And it didn't really happen. I just had a good time and I played with my friends. And then the next morning we went back to the venue and we all packed our stuff up and I drove home. It was, yeah, for me,
well,
it was.
Let me ask you, when you guys were thinking about it, going through your whole catalog, an incredible catalog of music you have, what was it like deciding what to play, knowing that these would be the last time you may play these songs with that group?
It's funny because for like, I don't know how long it was when we first kind of decided we were going to stop and when the last show was, but like I feel like there was a good 6 months where in the back of my head I was like, what are we going to play the last night, like but I didn't really go beyond just kind of like vague speculation because I know that we never ever, if we try and plan stuff, it never works very well on like a musical level or anything, which may be one of our problems, but it's also one of our strengths. So I was like, I don't know, we're just going to get there and we're going to play tunes, like we're just going to play what we feel like playing, and the last little run of shows was 5 shows. And there was all this talk leading up to it of like, do we want to not repeat anything over the course of those 5 shows? I'm hearing my voice echo back. I'll try my best to ignore it though. We were wondering like if we should have any repeats or not, just because on one hand, it's kind of like no repeats is, I don't know, impressive.
The thing, it's a jam band rule.
Yes, it's like improv. They have a lot of songs. Wow, they didn't repeat anything. But on the other hand, like we were kind of like, nobody's going to be unhappy to hear their favorite song one more time, And especially like the last night, like we made sure not to repeat anything over like a 2-night run, like we played the same venue 2 nights in a row to end it. We didn't repeat anything those 2 nights, but there was a couple of like the bigger tunes where like we were like, why wouldn't we play that again? And I was like, I don't think anybody would be sad to hear that song again. Nobody's going to complain about that.
Yep.
And we also didn't want to get to like the very last show and there's like, we already used up all our strongest stuff, So it kind of just worked itself out without us talking about too much. There was one tune We have this song called French Bowling. That's like one of our really popular ones. And we played it a couple nights before in Cleveland, and it has this middle section that's kind of tricky and like fast, and I botched it. Like, I think because I thought it was going to be the last time and there was like a little pressure. And I was like, can we do that one more time? I don't want that to be the last time we ever play. So we did that one more time, a couple other ones. But yeah, it worked pretty well. It was pretty natural. However it happened worked well. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. When you say something like, it wasn't emotional in the kind of way that maybe we think it might be emotional, that to me feels like a philosophical thing. Like you're ready for what's next. Or maybe you're the kind of person that approaches new things, new moments or opportunities, and you're able to kind of say the last, 10 years, however many years has been amazing. I can put that there and be so happy and grateful for that. And now it's time to do some other things and open up my life to new projects. Is that generally how you kind of work through life, or is that maybe specific to this scenario?
No, I hate change. I can't stand it.
Interesting. Okay, something like that. So that's why I was like, wow, how does he do that?
Yeah, but I think it got to the point where I had been doing, and I'm speaking for all of us, because like it was a very mutual decision to stop playing, but at least for me, and I think for the other guys, doing Dopapod was the longest I've ever done anything. Like even being in I was in Dopapod longer than I was in formal education.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, like,
Yeah.
think about it. Like we played for 16 years, and then kindergarten all the way through finishing college and getting your bachelor's degrees. That's 16 years of school.
Right.
So, like, I don't know how to describe it other than everybody was just ready. And I think, I don't know, for me, and this is kind of the nice thing, I guess, to like maybe like take back what I said a second ago, is I don't have to speak for the other guys. We can all just speak for ourselves at this point. But for me, it was kind of scarier to like think of like just continuing with no change. Like that was a scarier notion than having like empty question mark. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like that was exciting, and staying the same was scary. Or at least staying the same was scarier than change was. I think it just passed the point where like they're both scary, but the staying the same part felt even scarier than changing.
Yeah. So. Is that due to, and maybe this is something that you don't want to answer, but, is that due to just the way that the music industry is right now? Like, is that forces beyond our control type of thing that makes you feel that way?
No. 'Cause I sort of designed my career where I don't really have a choice but to keep going no matter what. Yeah. Like I don't know how to do anything else, so it's not like I can quit. And I think the industry got harder, but I don't think there was anything industry-wise or economically that made us have to stop. Like we could have figured stuff out. We could have like not brought a lighting package out and said, we can't afford to bring a monitor engineer, and we can't afford to bring a front of house guy or a lighting guy, and we're going to go back to traveling in a van instead of a band. We could have done stuff, but I think we all just knew what we wanted. So it's not a decision that was like made necessary by outside factors like the economy or anything like that. It certainly contributed, but I would say that decision was completely all in our ballpark.
You guys really had bucked the system there, especially after COVID. You put out the one album that was the game that had the game board with it, and then I guess your last release was 2 albums, right? Like 3 days apart, that spelled Fear of Palindromes.
Yeah.
Is that where it was? So I mean, it seems like you guys had figured out how to maybe work outside the system at the end there.
I suppose, to be fair, I was never the person making like any of those big financial decisions. I was just the guitar player, which I like being. Again, that's sort of how I designed my music career to be.
Right. So
As much as I can help it, I only really have to worry about playing the guitar.
Right. We open up this year and Neighbor announces that Lyle is leaving and that you're jumping on. And I found that so fascinating because Dopapod and Neighbor don't necessarily sound the same. Can we get the backstory about how you ended up in that position?
Yeah. I mean, well, me and Lyle I've known almost everybody in that band for a really long time, but Lyle, actually I've known Ricky a little longer. But Lyle's a guitar player, so we tend to know each other a little better because we play the same instrument. And I mean, we've just like hung out and kept in touch over the years. And originally, actually, Lyle had hit me up because he had found like a teaching job for me. He was like, I know the band's stopping and like you probably need work. Would you want like this teaching job? And I was like, maybe, I don't know. So I, for a while that was, I interviewed for that thing and everything. And I was like, wow, thanks, Lyle. Like you're really saving me right here, And then sometime in the fall, I want to say like November or something, I got a call from Ricky, the keyboard player, saying Lyle was leaving and that Lyle had kind of recommended me. But they did try some other people out too, who I'm sure all would have been awesome, And, to be honest, and I'd never encountered this before because I had never had to like find a new job before. I'd always I left college, I had Dopapod, and I just did that forever. I did other stuff too, but I always had Dopapod. So it was really, I can't say, and this is to no reason that has anything to do with Neighbor. It's more like it was really hard to make any decision about anything because I've never had to really before. I was always like,
well, you don't like change.
Yeah. And I've always been like, well, I do Dopapod. So anything else, like I'll fit it in when I can. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like before Dopapod was even over, I kind of had to start making some big decisions, and, so it took me a little while and some back and forth conversations with Ricky, and they were definitely like, they're kind of going through the same thing. Like they're losing a member, and Ricky and Lyle grew up with each other. So it's a huge decision for them to find a new guitar player too. So on either side of it, there was some like sort of maybe apprehension for a little bit. But Lyle's one of my favorite guitar players in the world. So like, I don't know if one of your favorite guitar players asks you to take over for him, like you should put some serious consideration into that. That's like, it's an honor.
And I don't know, like, to what extent your identity gets wrapped up in a band versus kind of being, a person. And I say this, I was a teacher for a long time, for almost 15 years. And when I left teaching, which was a while ago now, I was like, wow, I didn't realize how much of who I am I think of as a teacher. Like, what am I now? What do I do? I work at a company? Like, what is that? And it was weird. And I had to kind of reevaluate things. And then I, was able to reconcile that. But I'm sure that at some point, you think about that, or at least making that break. Like you're saying, you have to kind of figure some stuff out.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned like, you were like, well, Neighbor and Dopapod are very different. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do it, is because they were different. That's how, as a musician, that's how you grow, is by putting yourself in totally different situations than what you're used to.
How do you approach it? Like there's, you have a sound. I can listen to something and say that's Rob playing guitar from your equipment and how you play. You're walking into another band that has, set things. The songs are built the way they are. The guitar solos are what they are. How do you approach making sure that you put your stamp on it while respecting what existed?
I respect it by still just sounding like myself. because like the most respect I can possibly pay to Lyle is to know that no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to sound like him. So why even try to do a bad imitation? I'm just going to show up there and play like me. I'm going to learn the parts.
Right.
You know, I put a ton of work into learning the songs. I'm still working on them. But as far as like I'm not going to go out and buy a Telecaster and do a Lyle impression, you know? It's just like, I'd be foolish to think that anybody other than him can do what he does. So I should just be me. That's the most respectful I think I could possibly be, you know?
I think of Tim joining Lotus and how sometimes he really, it sounds like the old Lotus, but sometimes it sounds like he's taken what they had and it's become something new. I'm very interested to see where this goes. When is the first gig, or have you already played with them?
No, I haven't played with them yet. I'm this weekend on Sunday is Lyle's last show, and I'm gonna join them for that. It's at the Cabot Theater in Beverly, Mass. Is it Sunday? Is tomorrow Friday?
Yeah, tomorrow's Friday.
Okay, it's a Sunday. Yeah. I'm not playing the whole night. I mean, if it were up to me, I would just watch Lyle play all night. But I'm gonna play a few tunes because that's.
Are they bringing a torch to pass to you?
Not. But you know, that'll be great, and I kind of am. I mean, I want to just enjoy the concert and savor it, but I really kind of want to just like see how Lyle plays everything. I'm kind of going to be in studying mode too, if I'm being honest, you know, because I got to be. But yeah, and then the first full gig I'm playing with them is on March 6th in Killington, Vermont. So that's great for me because I live in Vermont. You know, something about that is like kind of like a little more comfortable than if my first show was at, you know, I don't know, the Wilbur Theater in Boston or something. We're playing like a ski bar or something. I've never been to the Pickle Barrel, but I think it's like a pretty Vermonty spot, you know? And what's neat about that too, that's kind of cool. I mean, it's a total coincidence, but I just think it's kind of cool is that first gig is on March 6th, which is also the date of the first time I ever played with Dopapod back in the day too.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
That is interesting.
Yeah, March 6th, 2008 was the first time I played the Dopapod, and yeah, pretty cool.
And then you're layering in dates starting in April, I think, with the Niche, right? So you've got that going on. Can you talk a little bit about them? That's a band that people may be just a little less familiar with.
Yeah, of course.
I know you have a long history with them too.
Oh, I have so much history to talk about with them. Yeah, so we're doing some shows in April. And I don't think they've played in almost 20 years or something. No, but close to it. And
2006 is what my notes say. They stopped touring at the end of 2006, so 19 years.
Yeah, but they would occasionally like play like one-off things very, very rarely after that. But yeah, touring and traveling and playing a lot, it's been since then. But they're from my hometown, Rochester, New York. And I went to community college with their keyboardist, Willie. And they're one of my favorite bands ever. Like, they're really formative for me because I was like 17. I was 17 when I got to community college because I have a fall birthday. So I was walking around the campus one day and they were like playing on the stage outdoors. And, you know, 17, you're like a sponge. You're finding like all your music that's going to be your favorite. And I wandered across them. And then I sort of became friends with Willie, and he would sneak me into their shows like through the back door because I was underage. And I'd be in the front and I knew the words to every song, you know. And they didn't tour all over the country or anything. They were mostly just around the Northeast, you know. But there's something cool about that I always loved of like having your favorite musicians be people that you could just go up and talk to. Like, there's nothing saying that your favorite musicians in the world have to be like this Mount Rushmore, you know, unapproachable thing. And Rodney Mullen, the skateboarder, he used to say that about skateboarding. Like, some of his favorite skateboarders ever were the dude in his town, you know? And, you know, I really love that band because I could be this little geeky kid and I could go ask him questions and talk to him and, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more story. Hold on.
Okay.
So, sorry, there's a lot of history with this.
I love this. Yeah.
So I was seeing them one night, probably 17 or 18, and they had posters that were free and you would get them at the merch table. And I got a poster and I was standing up front with my poster. And this lady comes up and she's like, "That's my poster." And I'm like, "No, it's my poster. And there's free ones anyways. You can go get another." But for some reason, she thought it was her poster. And then she grabbed me by the hair and threw me on the ground and took the poster. And the band found out about it and they were really upset about it. Like, this poor kid just got assaulted at their show by the scary lady. And like a couple of days later, I got this message on my mom and dad's answering machine, because it's 2005, mind you. And it's Willie, and he's like, "Hey, it's Willie from the Niche. I was wondering if you would want to like come sit in with us sometime." I think just because he felt bad that the lady ripped my hair out. So I went and sat in with them, and it was one of the first times I've like played in front of like a lot of people, you know, which isn't, you know, it was like a bar, you know, but filled with, I don't know, 250 people or something. When you're 7, I mean, I'm 38 and that's still a lot sometimes, you know, but when you're 17, that's definitely a lot. It might as well be Wembley Stadium.
Mhm.
So yeah. And then at one point their guitar player, I was about to leave for Berklee College of Music, and their guitar player was leaving the band, and me and one other guy were like both kind of auditioning to be the band. I almost didn't go to Berklee and joined that band instead. Joined the Niche, you know?
Right.
So they picked the other guy, which I'm really glad they did, because then I went to Berklee and met all my Dopapod friends, you know. But now here we are, you know. Yeah. So we're gonna play some shows. Yeah.
So sorry, I got excited a couple minutes ago because you were talking and this question popped into my head. So I'm from the Northeast, and I remember the Niche, and I remember they opened for Object Project or the Zappa tribute and all
They
that.
totally did, yeah.
Saw them a couple times, but their music, the way that I think of it is a little more on the intricate, complex side. So in addition to just being like friends and people you've known for a long time, does that scratch an itch for you musically that's different? I mean, it must be a little bit different than Neighbor, and it's cool you've got those different things going on at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Neighbor has some really intricate things too, but in a much different way.
Yeah.
And both bands kind of have this thing. What I really love when bands do this, where they can write really kind of complicated stuff, but aren't afraid to write really simple songs too. They both kind of have that. The Niche had that too. But when they did write complicated stuff, I mean, I'm finding out all over again that they're complicated. Because I'll play them 5 times in a row and I'll be like, "Oh my God, I can't get this one part," you know. But I like that, you know, and it's kind of funny because whenever I try and write music, I don't really write like that, but I like complicated kind of compositional things. I've tried. Sometimes I can pull it off, but more often than not, no. But I love playing that stuff as a guitar player. That's like what I love to do. So it's kind of this funny dichotomy. So I do need that itch scratched as like a player to keep my brain alive. Both bands are scratching that itch, though.
Nice.
And honest, you know. Yeah.
Right. Can I ask you how you approach songwriting? You just mentioned that. Are you a type of play something and save little snippets, or do things come more fully formed for you?
I don't. If I'm being completely transparent, I don't consider myself a songwriter at all. I'm a guitar player who every once in a while's got a song in him. But when I wake up in the morning, like I know people like Eli and Dopapod, like he writes every day. And, you know, we'd be like, "Hey, let's get some new songs together." And he'd be like, "Here's everything I've written in the last 3 months." And there'd be 50 demos, you know? It's like he wakes up every day and he just has to write or he's not okay, you know?
Right.
I feel that way with guitar playing, but not necessarily like I have to play guitar or I'm not even the same person. Writing songs, I sort of just wait for them to come to me, and they probably should come more often, but
Right.
you know, yeah. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to disappoint anybody who thinks It's like
No, that's
super
why we
creative
asked these
songwriter
things.
guy, but I'm really
Right.
I'm happy being a guitar player. That's what I like
Right.
to do, you know.
That's why we asked Berkeley. What's up with Berkeley? Man, so many jam band musicians have been through Berkeley. It's like a hotbed or something.
Well, I don't know. They teach you what you need to know, you know, and you
Mhm.
meet who you need to meet. So it's a popular place to go, even if you don't stay there. Like I only went for 4 semesters, you know, and my parents knew they couldn't afford the whole thing. They were like, just get in there, meet who you need to meet, and learn what you need to learn, and like get out. You
Before we have
know?
to take another mortgage out.
Yeah. So years later, I remember with my mom, I was like, I'm sorry I didn't graduate, Mom. She was like, oh no, that was great. She's like,
I
we
know
were hoping that would happen.
Nikki Gillespie, she went there a few semesters. I don't know if
Oh,
John
okay.
Mayer made it through. Mayer went
Yeah,
there.
he went for
though.
1 semester, I think.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Good stuff. All right. Well, you mentioned Willie, who the keyboard player from the Niche.
Yeah.
You had something called Borg Party, which I couldn't find anything to listen to, but apparently it was members of Dopapod, and you had some other guys in it.
Yeah.
You want to give us a little backstory on that? Aqueous, somebody from Aqueous was in it, maybe?
Okay. Yeah, aqueous. Yeah. Well, you know how it goes. Like when you're on tour and all your friends are in other bands, every once in a while, like people have free time and you kind of form like a super group and play a couple shows for fun. And that's what Borg Party was. I was going to be home for, I think, Thanksgiving or maybe it was Christmas. I was going to be in Rochester. And I just kind of like realized like, well, like Mike Ganser's only just over in Buffalo. And James Searle from Giant Panda is from Rochester. He'll probably be home for the holidays, at least for a visit.
Right.
And Michelangelo Caruba from Turquoise is from Buffalo. He'll probably be home with his family. And Willie lives in Rochester and he's a keys player. I'm like, this is kind of just waiting to happen, you know? So, you know, I feel like Borg Party was sort of a crime of opportunity, you know?
Was it recorded? Did you guys record?
There's some YouTube videos up for sure if
Okay.
you look. Yeah.
All right.
And,
I have to dig deeper.
yeah. Yeah. And there might be some like archive recordings too. Like we didn't really we had like 2 original songs that Willie wrote.
Right.
But that was about it. The rest was like covers and jamming, you know.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. There was another variation sort of on Borg Party called Oval Sandwich too. But that had Paul McCardle on guitar. Are you familiar with Paul McCardle at all? He was in the Niche later on. He's who joined the band after Eric left.
Okay.
And he was in another band called Doja back in the day.
Okay.
But he was on guitar too, and he's another one of my guitar heroes. He's kind of like what Lyle is, but in more of like the jazz jam band direction. And Lyle would be more in the Americana country guitar direction.
Gotcha.
And he's great. So yeah, I don't know if there's any video of Oval Sandwich. It's a similar thing, just with Paul on guitar and a different drummer, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I love those. And I mean, I'm thinking that for where you are right now, you know, those kind of moments maybe will be easier for you to come by. Do you have any like projects or other collaborations, things in the works or that you'd like to have happen?
Yeah, of course. There, especially up in Vermont, there's so many good musicians, and for better or worse, a lot of our bands broke up recently. So a lot of people are available, you know? So I've been playing in Stowe, Vermont on Thursdays with Gub, the twiddle bass player,
Okay.
and either Adrian Tramontano he was in Twiddle and Kung Fu and The Breakfast. He's either on drums, or Cotter Ellis from Goose will be on drums. It kind of depends on the week.
Right.
And Leon Campos is usually on keys, but it varies. Like I think they're still playing every Thursday at Stowe Cider. I'm not always there. They kind of get whoever they can. But that lineup we liked so much that we're going to kind of like book some more shows and take it on the road a little bit for fun.
Nice.
Yeah. And Chuck from Dopapod is moving back to Vermont in April, and we definitely want to play some music together. We can't not. Yeah. you know. So we're gonna put something together too, me and him, and we don't know what though. We don't know what it'll sound like, you know. I think right now, because everybody has so much other stuff they're doing and everybody's really busy, that any bands like that, I think sort of a mission statement for it is that we want it to be good but easy, because everybody's already got so much responsibility in other ways that we want it to be the best music it can be while still being like the easiest kind of situation it can be, you know. And a lot of times that's made really cool music when people just write really simple songs so that they just have something that improvising can live inside of. That's some of the, I mean, that was the whole like point of like bands like Aquarium Rescue Unit, at least initially, you know, simple music that they can be complicated inside of, you know. If they want.
I was talking to Lo Faber recently from God Street Wine, and he was saying when he first started writing songs, everything had to have parts, and you know, he wrote out all the bass lines and everything. And then he said once he did that for a while, he was like, sometimes the 3-chord song is all you need.
It really is, especially if everybody's trying to improvise, almost like the simpler the better. Like you want the least amount that you have to worry about, you know.
Yeah. We've heard that time and again in terms of improvisation, of, you know, beginning of a career, like you got chops, of course you want to share that, you know, but then realizing the space in between playing is just as important, kind of having that like internal trust or confidence. People describe it differently, to kind of maybe simplify, but think about improvising in a different way. Has that changed for you over time, how you would approach a jam?
It changes every day and every hour. Like I
love it.
Like I remember like some earlier last year, I had to teach this like clinic over the internet about improvisation. And I talked to all these musicians, and it was like this. It was like a video thing with like, I don't know, 20 people watching. And I came up with this list of like things that were important to me when I'm jamming and things to keep in mind. And I made it while I was on tour and we were playing the shows and everything. And then by the time I got home and did the clinic, like I didn't even like believe half of the points that I wrote down anymore. You know, I felt the opposite about some of them even. So yeah, it changes all the time. If it's not, I'd be worried. If it isn't changing, then I would say I'd be suspicious that something's wrong, you know.
Right, you're stuck. Do you like
and I mean, it also depends on who you're playing with too. Like the rules and like guidelines that you might make for yourself could be dependent on who you're on stage with, you know?
Right.
Do you like teaching?
I love teaching. Yeah. I would say that a ratio with teaching as compared to live performance is that teaching just needs to be the smaller percentage of the two. If it's greater than the amount I'm on stage, like I want to be a player who also teaches and not a teacher who also plays, just because I feel like I'll be a worse teacher actually if I teach more than I play, because all the things that I want to tell people about are like hinged on being on stage to bring those ideas to life. Like all the things I would talk about, I learned on stage anyways. So if I'm not on stage, then I'm kind of feel like I'm just BSing them anyways, you know? But if I only do one of the two things exclusively, I go a little nuts. So a healthy balance of both is good for me. But I definitely, my sweet spot is that I want to be performing and playing, and then whatever time I have afterwards, I can fit in lessons where I please, rather than the other way around. You know.
Right now, do you do virtual lessons or are you all in person?
They're all virtual right now. I would love to like find a space in Vermont where I could teach in person, because I do miss being able to play with students at the same time. Right. But I sort of just have not found a scenario in my head where I guess it's financially worth it to like pay for a space. And
what about a community college?
Yeah, I would do that if anybody would hire me. Yeah. I would totally do that if anyone would hire me. I don't know how to go about asking for something like that.
I've always wanted to teach punk rock at a community college. I even tried to develop a syllabus, but then you have to sell it to them. Basically, you have to pitch them that this class would actually get people to show up.
God, I mentioned earlier that Lyle had kind of recommended me for this teaching job,
Mhm.
and that was all remote. It was all over the internet, but it was like this, like I would basically be faculty for this thing. And I like interviewed the guy who ran the thing, nicest guy in the world. And he asked me to send him something. He was like, send me your I don't know. It was like an abbreviated thing. He was like, send me your OB or something like that. And I had to look up what that meant. And it was basically like a resume, but for teachers, I was like, I don't even know what that is. So I would love to teach at a college setting. At least in my mind, I think I would like to. Maybe once you're in it, it might feel different. But I wouldn't discount that someday.
Right now, if somebody wanted to get a lesson from you, can they go somewhere online and contact you to do that?
Yeah, they can just email me at rob@dopapod.com. Still, it's easy.
We
Yeah.
were doing a little promo spot for you there for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, your website is it leans towards, that kind of thing when we look at your website. So
Yeah. The last couple of months I haven't been teaching too much because I've been learning so much music that there hasn't been that much time for anything else.
Did they give you a whole list for Neighbor? Did they say learn everything, or did they give you a list of songs to focus on to start?
Kind of a list of songs to focus on to start. And they haven't even given me a complete list of how many songs there are. I just know how many I've learned so far and that there's still more. Nobody's sure how many songs they have. They have a lot though. For better or worse, for my sake, they have a lot.
All right. Does anything disappear? Any of Lyle's stuff, or is everything still on the table?
To be honest, I don't even know the answer to that question, but I've learned tunes that I know are Lyle's tunes, and nobody told me not to learn them.
Okay.
If they do, I'm happy to not play them, but I learn them anyhow,
Well, and so back to your website for a second, in terms of learning things, I love that you have some transcriptions on there.
Oh, thank you.
And they're really very fun and interesting selections too. And as I was looking and I scroll down to the bottom of that part of your website and I see this PDF called Thoughts to Ponder. That looks interesting. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. I haven't updated. I haven't thought about that website in a really long time. It just kind of sits there now, but I know exactly what you're talking about. That's another thing that I wrote, and then I don't necessarily agree with all of it anymore.
It was very interesting, and I love it. And what I loved about it is it's first person. It's so real and just honest, right, about where you were at that point in time. But it made me think, not only teaching the mechanics of music, but as an industry, you had some really great kernels, seeds of, just advice for people based on where you've been. One of the ones that kind of caught my attention was don't be afraid to get paid. And you kind of wrote a little bit of don't be a dick about it, but yeah, you're a musician, you deserve to get paid for what you do. That's your job. And I think that there's a lot of value being able to tell people who want to get into the business just what the day-to-day is like, in addition to the actual music part. So I love that you had that there. And I'm wondering, is that a part of your lessons too? Do you ever get into that, just those kinds of conversations with people, or is it more straight?
We'll get into anything anybody wants to talk about, I suppose, the thing is that sometimes people will ask the question of how do I start a band and get it on the road? And and I don't know how to answer that question, so they'll want business strategies sort of. And I'm I don't know, because it's always changing for one thing. For another thing, it was never really my responsibility to worry too much about that stuff. I sort of just found a band that I felt really good about and clung to it for dear life, you know? But as far as like an individual freelance musician who's like, okay, I'm gonna take these gigs and I'm gonna like, I need to ask for this much, and like, how do I go about having that conversation? That's one that I kind of feel confident talking about my experience with. If they're talking about like forming a band and being in charge of it and like making it into like an LLC, like I'm as lost as you are. If you ever find out, let me know, you know. But as far as just like being a guitar player or whatever instrument you play and making a living doing that, yeah, you know, I think that's an important conversation to have with yourself and with other people who you think might have some answers to some of your questions. You know?
Nobody's going to advocate for you. I always tell my kids that. I was like, you got to open your mouth. And you'd be amazed how many times you get a yes just because you opened your mouth. You know?
Well, I mean, there's so many great quotes over the years, like Charlie Parker's was "Know your worth," you know, which could work two ways because like whatever answer you think is right, you know, like if you don't think you're worth much, then that's true. But if you know,
I like Ray Charles with you could think in pennies or you could think in dollars.
Yeah. But you know, that's one that's, I feel like that's pretty, you can be transparent with yourself. You can think about like, I think there's a difference between like what you cost and what you're worth, you know, like what you cost is like what you need to like get there, how much time you're going to spend learning songs when you could have been taking other gigs or teaching lessons and thinking about like, well, or if you have a day job and you're taking off of work, like I remember the first time I ever went on tour with a band, we knew we weren't going to make any money. And I had like a job teaching guitar in Boston. I was like, it was like a week of shows or something. And I was like, all I need is if you can pay me what I would have made if I had stayed home and taught lessons. Right. That's it. So I feel like stuff like that is like what you cost. Whether or not you're worth that much, like, are they going to make back that much by you being there? I don't know. That's a tricky thing. And nobody knows the answer until it's the end of the night, you know?
They do the door.
Yeah. But, you know, sometimes people too, they'll like be like, I need this much. And then if the night doesn't go that well, you can kind of like, be a team player and be like, I know, like maybe that wasn't the strongest night. Like maybe I'll only take this much this time. Like sometimes I've seen people do that. You want to have a backbone, but sometimes you also want to like be a team player. And,
you don't want to see everybody else get $10.
You also want venues to have you back. So like, if they're like, well, he charged this much and then like not enough people came, like we don't want him back next time. But if they're like, well, we worked together for something that worked for everybody, we'll have him back again. Sometimes you're playing the long game too, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Adaptability, you know, it's everything. And I would imagine a huge part of being on the road. Do you like touring? Is that something that you enjoy, like being out there for, you know, a while at a time?
I love it. I feel like I'm the only one I feel like most people don't. You know? Like, yeah, I hear every musician being like, oh, it's so hard and I can't do it anymore. And I love it, you know? There are things that are certainly hard about it. There are things about it that I don't love, but it as a whole, I just love being out there and playing and traveling.
It's like the last vestige of the American dream to just go on the road and see what happens. I mean, it's a very romantic thing to me. I've never done it beyond following the Dead or Fish or somebody around for a couple weeks. But
I always kind of thought it was like being a pirate, like you're on a pirate ship on the high seas, but in the best way, not in like the scurvy way.
No, but
although if you eat enough ramen noodles, you could technically get scurvy. But
yeah, that's all you got. But you're right. I used to work for a band doing merch, and we'd go out for 5-6 weeks at a time in a van. I loved it. It was to me, and I think maybe people are just kind of naturally driven to enjoy it and really just kind of appreciate that and be okay with it. Being somewhere all the time.
Yeah, and that's also not to say that I don't love being home. I just love both, you know? Like, I love being at home with my family and taking it easy, but, um, I suppose with touring too, like, the older I get, the more I know what kind of touring I like the most. Like, as much as it seems really fun when you're younger, like, being on, like, a bus with your friends and everybody's in this vehicle, like, all across, driving around the country together. I really love just driving to shows in my own car at this point, you know? Um, and, um, yeah, even, with Dopapod, like, we would travel around in a vehicle all together with bunks in it and everything. But if I ever could, like, if it made sense for me to just drive in my own car and everyone was okay with it, I would do that. I loved it, you know?
When the 8x10 reopened,
Yeah.
as the Funk Box years ago, they had Chuck Berry play the first night.
Wow.
And Chuck Berry drove up in his car, in his Cadillac, sat in front, called in, and said, transfer the money. When he got confirmation the money was in his account, he grabbed his guitar out the back seat, came in, parked his car in the alley, blocked the alley, played his hour, walked off stage and said, $5,000, I'll do an encore. And the owner was like, nah, we got Papa Grow and George Porter coming up. And he hopped in his car and drove off.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. I once heard somebody told me that the Max Creek guys said that the reason that they've been able to be a band as long as they have is that everybody drives to the gig in their own car.
Well, there's something to be said for that. There's a great book that chronicles, I think, 10 years of Wynton Marsalis's touring. It's called Jazz and the Bittersweet Blues of Life, and it's about touring and what it's like to be in that environment. It's a really cool book. Is written by someone that was on the road with them, but not a musician. And they talk a lot about the importance of finding personal space when you aren't able to actually get any, kind of finding that moment to be able to mentally decompress on your own.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of bands, have you ever had the experience of like, you go like hang out with a band that maybe you're friends with or something, and you go hang out with them at the venue or something, and they've already been on the road for like 3 weeks or something? There's a lot of quiet time at that point in a tour. Like everybody's like really just keeping to themselves. And I think that's a healthy thing to do,
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
And we would always like kind of pre-show, like we wouldn't avoid each other, but if anybody ever just wanted, like sometimes I would go to a restaurant and one of the other guys would be in the same restaurant and we wouldn't necessarily even like sit with each other. It was just sort of this understood thing of like, everybody probably wants like just to like have their own space for a little bit,
Definitely. You got to have that, or you can't continue for as long as you guys did. I mean, you have to be able to do that. It's like having kids, eventually you want your
Speaking
kids
of which,
to go away. You're like,
my kid just woke up. I was just going to go wake him up. Can I go grab my kid?
Go grab him.
Yeah,
Yep. Oh, that's fantastic.
Kevin, you would like that book.
Yeah, I might have to look into that.
I'll send you a link. It's a great one, and I had the author on my old radio show.
Okay.
Talking about what it was like for him as a non-musician writer to kind of just be there, like absorbing.
Right, watching it.
Yeah.
Look at that guy. Oh, what a sweetheart. Oh, I love little kids. Oh, hey, buddy. Hi, buddy.
He's still grumpy because he's waking up.
Yeah, that's okay. Let me ask you.
Oh, yes. My son was like that too.
We'll wrap this up in a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know you're a Fish fan.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame getting nominated?
I think it's awesome,
Did they have a chance?
Huh?
Did they have a chance to get in first ballot?
I think they do. I mean, like, I think they're on a very small list of like the most important American rock bands of all time. Most of the really, really important rock and roll bands are like English. Like, let's be real,
Right.
So I feel like Fish takes up a list of like that's pretty small as far as like really, really important rock bands. But I also don't know how important they are in other parts of the world. I just know how important they are to me.
Right.
You know?
But I guess part of my thing is they look at like record sales. I mean, Fish has never had a hit record kind of thing like that. So how many of the people who actually vote might not have even heard of Fish? I mean, Fish is huge, but they're also under the radar. They've walked this incredible line of,
Yeah, but I think that's one of the most impressive parts about them is that they've done what they've done without what you're talking about.
Right.
Especially for like, like being a musician's really hard. And a lot of times, like everybody's really trying to convince you that whatever sells the most and whatever show has the most people is automatically the best. Like that's the indicator of what greatness is. And it isn't necessarily, So if we're talking record sales, like I would love to see a band that doesn't have the most record sales get that kind of accolades, It would make me feel good because I've always been under the impression that that's all kind of a bunch of crap and that greatness is like in the eye of the beholder. And like if it's great to you, then it's great.
My granddad would say if it's popular, it sucks.
Well, no, there's no going either way. It's not an opposite scenario because there's stuff that sells billions of records that's amazing too. But
if Mariah Carey gets in and Fish doesn't, though, I think people may riot. There may be.
I love Mariah Carey. That would be awesome too.
Yeah, right. Challenge the criteria just a little bit to have it be broad enough to have different things count.
Like if it were up to me, I would just put like Aquarium Rescue Unit in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something, but that's never going to happen.
Well, you know what we need to bring back is the jammies. Then
those are so great. Yeah.
We can take care of it ourselves. Maybe that's something that needs to happen, and then Rock and Roll Hall of Fame can do whatever it wants.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about Dopapod. Is the website still up? Do you guys still have merch? Can people still do you still have stock of stuff that people can try to get a hold of, like some of those albums I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, of course. And I even, we haven't checked in with each other in a really at all this year. But the last time we all talked, we were going to maybe release some of our old albums on vinyl and maybe even release some live albums from shows that we thought were particularly good. And,
that's smart. That's a great way to keep your, to keep in the public consciousness and also maybe, be able to buy dinner for the kids one night.
Yeah. I don't know what they would be, but there's a lot of shows anything post COVID, I feel like are some of our favorite Dopapod shows. So I'd be excited to pick some shows and make them a little more readily accessible to people who aren't because a lot of people aren't on Nugs or something. They don't know where to find that,
Right. Did you listen to Dopapod after you played shows? Did you go back and listen to the shows, or were you of the camp, I don't want to know what happened?
Do you mean over the course of our career, or do you mean did I go back and listen when we were all done this?
No, when you were all let's say you played last Tuesday night and then you were home the next week. Did you get back and listen to the show from the week before just to see?
I would listen a little more intently earlier on. Mm-hmm. But even at the end, I would listen to a lot of stuff, even if it was just for a minute. A lot of times it was, what's up? A lot of times it was just to see if I liked the sound of the guitar, because we were always trying to make that as good as we thought it could be. So a lot of times I would just listen to be okay, the guitar sounded good that night. Or I would listen to some show where I knew I used a different effect or a different guitar than I normally do to see if I liked the sound of it.
There you go.
And then I would even A/B them sometimes, I wouldn't really necessarily listen for entertainment's sake, I'd say,
Right. Well, I know some people would go back and they listen and, then they beat themselves up over it or something like that. And there's some musicians who felt like they had to listen to everything they did. And others, I guess Fish does, They don't talk about it. They don't listen to it. They played it. It's there.
Yeah.
We've moved on to the next thing, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if there was a really particularly cool moment, I'll check it out for sure.
Mhm.
There you go.
I would say that sometimes, like, if it's a really like a show I really had a great time at, really thought it was special, I'll go out of my way not to listen to it at all because I don't want to like.
You don't want to find out.
I totally get that. Yeah, keep it where you have it already, you know?
Yeah, I just don't want to ruin it for myself. Like we had one show kind of towards the end at the Blind Pig in Ann Arbor that like was so much fun. Like just one of my favorites. And it was good when all 4 people had a equally great time. And I'm not even speaking to the quality of the music because I honestly don't know the answer to that. I just know if people had fun and if I had fun.
Mhm.
So if all 4 of us had like a super good time, then it was probably a good one. And I won't even listen back to that one just so that I'm
That's the one you should release.
Yeah, probably, but I still probably won't listen to it.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I hear you. All right, we're coming up on an hour. What you thinking, Amanda?
Yeah, I think I really appreciate this. You have been so open and just sharing so much. So, Rob, thank you for joining us today. I think we'll make sure to share links and all the information so people know where to find you and information on lessons and everything you've got.
Sure.
Kevin, do you want to take us out? Because I'm not sure I know what your clip is.
Everybody watching, make sure that you follow us. Hang out for a second, Rob, so we can thank you off the screen.
Okay.
If you're watching this later, leave a comment. Make sure that you follow us on the social medias at All That Jam Pod, wherever you can. We also have a .com. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground.